Hey there, I'm Joshua Johnson. It's good to be with you on this Tuesday, August 2nd, and we are talking about the midterms with special election coverage tonight. 5 states hit the polls and mailed in ballots today. Former President Trump could play a significant role along with his election conspiracies. Chuck Todd starts us off tonight with an election preview. Then we focus on Kansas. It's voting today on abortion rights with a measure that could open the door to restrictions. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is in Taiwan on a highly controversial trip. It sparked some anxiety in the West and intense condemnation from China. But the U.S. is a vocal supporter of Taiwan. We'll dig into the blowback and consider what comes next. Also, the leader of al-Qaeda is dead, killed in a U.S. drone strike. What will this mean for the war on terror? And Beyonce and Lizzo both removed the same word from their latest albums. Critics said it offends people with disabilities. We'll tell you what that word was and get into the debate over ableism. It's another primary election day, and this one is really worth watching. Today, 5 states are choosing candidates for the midterms, which are less than 100 days away. The polls just closed in Missouri and Michigan and in parts of Kansas. The Kansas polls close entirely at 9 p.m. Eastern. Arizona closes at 10. Washington State votes by mail, and its deadline to drop off ballots is 11 p.m. Eastern. Kansans are also voting on abortion rights, the first such ballot item since Roe v. Wade was overturned. But abortion is just one national storyline running through this year's midterms. Another big one, former President Trump and his control of the Republican Party. He has endorsed a number of candidates on today's ballots. Let's begin tonight with NBC political director Chuck Todd, the moderator of Meet the Press and now of Meet the Press Now here on NBC News Now. Chuck, I feel like this is one of those nights where we could start with some context, because I think it's easy to say, it's a midterm in another state, it doesn't involve me. Yeah. But if for nothing else than the influence of the former president, tonight's midterms, I think, have a lot of national storylines worth watching.
They do, especially when you have a couple of battleground states also going, too, in Michigan and in Arizona. So the former president is trying to essentially build a Republican Party in his own image. Boy, I tell you, Arizona might be as good of a place to start where he's doing that, and perhaps doing that quite successfully, at least as far as taking over the Republican Party. Whether that works in November, I think, is going to be the bigger test for him, and perhaps the ultimate, could be the ultimate decider on whether the party is willing to sort of grudgingly rally around him or not. I mean, he is putting his stamp on a lot of these key Senate primaries, in particular in gubernatorial races. And if Democrats are beating Trump candidates in November in Arizona, in Georgia, in Michigan, that is not going to be a sign that somehow the party ought to stick with Trump. Now, we'll see who's got more sway when all's said and done. But I think this is a really big night for Trump in that respect. Then throw in the fact that 3 impeachers that he's targeted, 3 of the 10 folks that voted to impeach him, are also on primary ballots tonight in Washington State and Michigan. So it is a big night in testing Donald Trump's attempt to remake the party in his own image.
It seems also, Chuck, like you've got candidates, as you mentioned, trying to remake the party in Donald Trump's image, even despite some really big controversies around some of these candidates in Michigan, in Arizona, and elsewhere, that might give us an indication of, well, these are candidates who might otherwise be considered disqualified or unworkable, but because they have sufficient loyalty to the former president, Republican voters might decide that they are yet viable.
Look, I think the best example of this is actually in the state of Arizona. Kari Lake is the Trump candidate. Taylor Robeson is the, for lack of a better word, the establishment's candidate. And one would have been the nominee for governor, hands down, without much of a fight, in the version of the Republican Party that existed pre-Trump. And Kari Lake would have been laughed out of the party in the party that was run by your Paul Ryans and your Mitt Romneys. But in many ways, she, I think, is in some ways, the perfect avatar for the Trump movement. Here's somebody who honed her skills somewhere else in media, is a sort of newcomer to the Trump movement. They love the newcomers in some ways, almost more so than they love people that have been in the party a long time. And so I do think you sort of see this, as you say, it's candidates that never would have been seen as sort of generally qualified, who are able to potentially get through primaries that in the pre-Trump era they never would have even come within a nose hair.
We will have plenty of projections through the night. Obviously, you're going to be giving more projections. I should just note, we mentioned that the polls close in Missouri and Michigan and in much of Kansas. Obviously, it's still early yet. So just to be clear, we have characterized the Senate races in Missouri, the Republican and Democratic races, as too early to call. Understandable. Hopefully, we'll get more information as the evening comes in. What about with regard to the Democrats watching these races? We've reported in the past, and there's been reporting that some of these candidates who are very tightly Trump-aligned, there's actually been some Democratic efforts to sort of goose those candidates up in the hopes that general election voters in November will find them too far afield and then go for the Democrats. So they might be getting support from the Republican Party and kind of Democrats trying to give them enough rope to hang themselves.
Well, there's two good examples just in Michigan alone. It is a Democratic super PAC has been running some negative ads against Tudor Dixon, who is seen as the potential frontrunner for that nomination for governor. Though I think that race is going to be very close with another, even though Trump endorsed Tudor Dixon, there's another candidate that has arguably run a bit more of a Trumpy candidacy, a gentleman by the name of Kevin Rinke. And then also there's been a congressional race where the Democratic Party's House campaign arm spent money to essentially boost the primary opponent to Peter Meijer being one of the 10 Republicans who voted to impeach Trump. The irony to that is we've got sources that have indicated to us, Joshua, that the person they helped, his name's John Gibbs, against Peter Meijer, Gibbs was already ahead when they decided to spend money to help him. So this is one of those cases where the fire had already been started, but now the Democrats could be accused of arson here. I mean, you better be careful because you might help a Trump candidate get a nomination who then wins in November. This is not the best environment for Democrats, particularly in swing districts.
Thank you, Chuck. We're going to switch roles at the top of the hour, and Chuck's going to be driving, and I'm going to be a guest. But for now, that's NBC Political Director Chuck Todd, the moderator of Meet the Press, and also Meet the Press Now, which airs now at 4 p.m. Eastern here. Chuck and Kristen Welker will anchor our Meet the Press election special. That's right after now tonight. I'll drop in throughout the evening with analysis, and they will have projections of races as results come in. So stick around for our live special coverage that starts at the top of the hour here on NBC News Now. All right, now let's focus back on Kansas. Its state constitution currently protects abortion rights. Today, voters are considering removing those protections. It is the first time that abortion will be on a ballot since the Supreme Court overturned Roe. This ballot item is called the Value Them Both Amendment. Passing it would not ban abortion outright, but it would give the Republican-controlled Kansas legislature a chance to do that. Polling suggests this could be a close vote. In a survey last month, 47% of voters said they would vote for the amendment. 43% said they would vote against it. That is well within the margin of error, so could go either way. All of this comes as the Biden administration is pushing back against some abortion bans. Today, the Justice Department sued the state of Idaho over its wide-ranging ban.
Every hospital that receives Medicare funds must provide necessary stabilizing treatment to a patient who arrives at an emergency room suffering from a medical condition that could place their life or health in serious jeopardy. In some circumstances, the medical treatment necessary to stabilize the patient's condition is abortion.
Idaho's law makes it a felony to perform an abortion in nearly all situations. It is set to take effect on August 25th. Joining us now is Lawrence Gostin, Faculty Director of Georgetown's O'Neill Institute for National and Global Health Law. Professor Gostin, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Can you explain a little bit more of the Justice Department's rationale for this lawsuit in terms of Medicare funds? What is it getting at there?
Yeah, I mean, the Attorney General Garland is absolutely right. There's a federal law that's been on the books for decades called EMTALA. And basically it requires any emergency department, really, they all get Medicare funds, so it wouldn't matter. Virtually all of them have to provide treatment to preserve the health or save the life of anybody who shows up in the emergency department. So what does that mean? I mean, somebody who's otherwise healthy and wants an abortion can't go in to an emergency room and say, give me an abortion. But if a woman comes in and she's critically ill, the only way to prevent her from deteriorating or from dying is to provide an abortion or miscarriage management, then federal law requires it. It doesn't matter about any state ban on abortion. What this law does is put, people's lives first.
So does this mean, I know this is hyperbole, but I'm intentionally asking you to talk me off this ledge. This doesn't mean that federal law protects abortions in ways that supersede these state bans, does it? This doesn't mean that like federal health law has written protections for abortion in, does it? This sounds more like it's bespoke to Idaho's case, or is this applicable more broadly?
It's applicable in any state where a woman comes into the emergency room and let's say she's bleeding, she's in distress, and the only way to stabilize her is to provide miscarriage management or abortion. Then no matter where you live in the United States, federal law requires the physician to give that abortion service care. As I say, it's not abortion on demand, but it's there to protect the health and life of patients who come to the emergency room. It was essentially written many years ago because we didn't want uninsured patients coming up to the emergency room and then just them being dumped or ignored. But it applies to everyone, and it applies to every medical service, including abortion. That's, again, I'm repeating, it's not that you can, an otherwise healthy woman can say, I want an abortion in an emergency room. But if she's in distress, those physicians, that emergency department, had better protect her life and her health. And if they don't, they're in violation of federal law. And I don't care what the state law says. It doesn't matter because federal law prevails.
There are a number of lawsuits in a number of states, particularly those that have new bans or restrictions on the books to try to restore abortion rights. How do you see this lawsuit from the DOJ fitting into that matrix of other lawsuits that are currently pending?
The truth is that after the Supreme Court decision, and it pains me to say this, most state abortion restrictions and bans are going to be lawful in the United States. But there still are ways that federal law should and could prevail. One, as I've explained, is emergency room. Another one is abortion medication. Currently, a little over 50% of all abortions in America are using the abortion pill. And it's likely to increase quite significantly. Now, the FDA has approved abortion pills as safe and effective. And states don't get to pick and choose which abortion medication or any medication, cancer, diabetes, you name it, that they will and won't allow patients to have. So another really fertile area for the federal lawsuits is in protection of access to abortion medication. And I think that is guaranteed under federal law, just as emergency care is guaranteed under federal law. But many of these other lawsuits won't succeed.
Right. Hey, Professor, sorry, my attention was a little bit divided because we just got a note from Capitol Hill about the bipartisan bill, the newly introduced bipartisan bill that would write protections that were previously provided by Roe into federal law. Our Capitol Hill team is reporting that Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat from Massachusetts, told us that she will not vote for the bill. She says, in her view, it does not codify Roe, and she said, quote, "The problem here is this bill is not an obvious improvement over where we stand right now," unquote. We had asked her if this is a case of the perfect being the enemy of the good, and that was what she responded. So again, this bill does not have the support of Senator Elizabeth Warren, which may kill the effort to try to get all 50 Democrats on board to move this forward. That's from our Capitol Hill team just tonight. Very briefly, before I let you go, where do you see the most potential for abortion rights? Is it in the courts or is it in Congress? Briefly, before we go.
I mean, I think Congress is a lost cause right at the moment. But if the Democrats were to take back the presidency, the Senate, and the House, which they currently have, and they can get all Democrats on board, that would be fruitful. The other thing is of course abortion medication and emergency care. I think that's low-hanging fruit that we can win.
Right. And by the way, I should clarify for those of you following these, this measure that I'm referring to is called the Reproductive Freedom for All Act. It was introduced just yesterday by Republican Senators Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins and Democratic Senators Tim Kaine and Kyrsten Sinema. And again, Senator Elizabeth Warren says she will not be voting for that bill. Georgetown Professor Lawrence Gostin, appreciate you talking this through with us tonight. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
Still to come, the trip to Taiwan. What will Speaker Pelosi's visit mean for tensions between Washington and Beijing? We're glad you're with us on this busy night for Now Tonight from NBC News. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has landed in Taiwan. It is the highest level trip by a U.S. official in 25 years, and it appears to have sparked a serious standoff with China. Moments after she landed, China's military said that it would carry out live fire military drills from Thursday to Sunday that would appear to infringe upon Taiwanese territory. Despite this saber rattling and the White House's efforts to calm things down, Speaker Pelosi's trip is getting some bipartisan support. Here's what Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said today.
I think it's important that the Speaker did go to Taiwan. I don't think the Chinese get to tell members of Congress where they can go.
House Speaker Pelosi is the second in line to the presidency, behind the vice president, of course. China's not happy about such a high-ranking U.S. official visiting a country it claims as its own. The U.S. is trying to avoid a full-blown crisis with China and support Taiwan at the same time. The Chinese Foreign Ministry released a statement today suggesting that Speaker Pelosi's visit, quote, has a severe impact on the political foundation of China-U.S. relations and seriously infringes upon China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, unquote. And we just learned that Chinese officials have summoned the U.S. ambassador to China, Nicholas Burns, for an unscheduled meeting. So, is this a nuanced political move by Speaker Pelosi? A diplomatic error? Maybe something else? Joining us now is Gordon Chang, the author of The Coming Collapse of China. Mr. Chang, good to have you back. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Joshua.
Can we start with this latest development about the Chinese Foreign Ministry calling the ambassador in for a late-night meeting, an unscheduled meeting at least? What do you make of that?
Well, certainly the Chinese have to do something. They created this test of wills. They've got to show displeasure. And among other things, they will call in the ambassador. So, you know, that's expected. The question is, what are they going to do next? And that is going to be the one thing that everyone's going to worry about. But I was surprised that they didn't try to interfere with the speaker's plane as it approached Taiwan. I'm so happy they didn't. Now their options are limited because anything they do afterwards looks like hollow saber rattling. So that's going to be good. But we'll have to watch this minute by minute.
Remind those of us who don't necessarily watch Taiwan closely why this is such a big deal. This has to do in part with a policy called the One China policy, right?
We have a One China policy. China has a One China principle. They're very different. What we say is that the status of Taiwan is unresolved, and that we insist that a resolution of that be peaceful. China looks at this, and the reason why it's important for the Communist Party is because they look at Taiwan as Chinese territory, and Taiwan has a vibrant democracy, it's prosperous, and it really undermines a lot of Communist Party narratives, because the Communist Party tells the Chinese people, look, you can't govern yourselves, you're not ready. But people in China look at it and say, look, Taiwan can do it, why can't we? So this is a critical threat to Communist Party rule.
We saw from the map just there that there were a number of other places that Speaker Pelosi was going on this trip. She didn't just fly straight to Taiwan. She is making an array of different stops in her tour of Asia, South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Malaysia, and already went to Singapore. Also, there's a long list of U.S. lawmakers who've been to Taiwan over the past 2 years. We can put those up on the screen. So I kind of wonder, in context, what does her visit really mean? I mean, is this because it's Nancy Pelosi? Is this because China just chose this moment to kind of get up in arms about this? I mean, as you can see, lots of senators and members of the House have been to Taiwan in just the past 2 years. So why is China making a thing of this now?
I think it is because it is the Speaker of the House, second in line to the president, but also because of problems inside China right now, where the Communist Party is worried about the debt crisis. It knows that the Chinese people are really unhappy about the zero COVID policy. And so there is a lot of unease in Beijing right now. And matter of fact, you know, we can see it from many of the comments on Weibo, which is China's Twitter-like service. Of course, you have the nationalists, we need to declare war on the U.S. type comments. But there are surprisingly a lot of people who have expressed what you would call anti-war, and basically saying, you know, China shouldn't be making a deal out of this. And that certainly is not something that Xi Jinping wants to hear.
China has been increasingly sort of posting up on Taiwan and aggressive in the South China Sea and investing more money in West Africa and its One Belt, One Road initiative, and just trying to flex its international muscle more and more and more. Who knows what China might do in I believe it's Indonesia when the G20 takes place this November, and what that conversation might be like with President Biden. You know, he and President Xi already spoke last week. Where does this go from here? I mean, what kind of end games are we talking about with this, if there are any? Is this just the kind of thing where China complains, does military drills, and then we go back to status quo? Or might this be advancing towards some kind of actual change in the way that China deals with the U.S.?
I think that Beijing has realized that this particular time that they may have overstepped. This has not worked out well, I think, for China in capitals in the region. And it certainly hasn't worked out well with the American people. You know, American people are not happy that they threatened the life of the speaker. And indeed, some of that language during the Thursday phone call between Xi Jinping and President Biden, where you could read that they threatened the life of President Biden. This isn't going down very well. And I think you're going to see that the United States will continue to pull away from China. And that is a good thing, because we need, you know, Xi Jinping is trying to pull away from us in many ways, trying to create self-sufficiency, try to make sure that the United States is viewed around the world as a submissive partner. That's not going to work out very well, Joshua. So I think that the American people are going to force their leaders to have a more robust view on Beijing and to act accordingly.
Before I let you go, I got to ask the devil's advocate question. There's a proverb that says meddling in affairs that are not your own is like grabbing a dog by the ears. Is this a dog that Speaker Pelosi really had to grab right now? We've got economic issues. We're dealing with the war in Ukraine. We got other stuff to deal with as the U.S. right now. Couldn't this wait? Did this trip have to happen this way right now?
The trip didn't have to happen now, Joshua, but once Beijing made an issue of it, then Xi had to go, because otherwise it would have told the world that China dictates American policy, and we would have emboldened the belligerents in Beijing, because we would have showed everybody else that aggression works. So once that occurred, once this test of wills, once China created this confrontation, there was no choice. She had to go.
Gordon Chang, author of The Coming Collapse of China and the Great U.S.-China Tech War. Appreciate you coming back. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joshua.
We will get to some of today's other top stories in a moment, including a new State Department warning after the killing of al-Qaeda's leader, disciplinary action for the Miami Dolphins from the NFL in a case of poaching, and a massive payday that Tiger Woods apparently passed up. Tonight's headlines begin with the latest fatality in the war on terror, al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri. The State Department is warning U.S. citizens to stay highly vigilant when traveling abroad. It says it's worried that supporters of al-Qaeda or al-Zawahiri could retaliate. He was considered Osama bin Laden's right-hand man. The U.S. had been pursuing him for more than 2 decades, but last night, President Biden announced that a drone strike took him out.
Justice has been delivered, and this terrorist leader is no more. People around the world no longer need to fear the vicious and determined killer. No matter how long it takes, no matter where you hide, if you are a threat to our people, the United States will find you and take you out.
So if justice has indeed been delivered, as the president said, what's next for the war on terror? Let's discuss it with Bruce Hoffman, Senior Fellow for Counterterrorism and Homeland Security at the Council on Foreign Relations. He's also a professor at Georgetown's Walsh School of Foreign Service. Professor, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
So what does this mean for America's war on terror? Now that Ayman al-Zawahiri is gone, what now?
Well, the war on terror, whether we like it or not, continues. Now, we've certainly been remarkably successful in degrading al-Qaeda's terrorist capability. In fact, al-Zawahiri is the 8th senior al-Qaeda commander or leader that either ourselves or with our assistance, our allies have eliminated just in the past 3 years. But the problem is, this is a movement that's now survived more than 3 decades. It survived the greatest onslaught in history ever directed against the terrorist organization. So it's become bigger than any one person or any one leader. So we have to be prepared, much as the warning from the State Department that you just mentioned at the top of the story. We have to be prepared that, the death of al-Zawahiri doesn't end the war on terror and doesn't end al-Qaeda. And certainly there will be those seeking retribution and revenge.
What about the saga of 9/11 in the United States? The U.S. has taken out Osama bin Laden, Ayman al-Zawahiri, a number of other high-ranking al-Qaeda leaders. Does that mean that the U.S. can sort of close the book on the post-9/11 search for justice, that piece of the war on terror, or are there still pieces unresolved?
No, you're absolutely right. And I think in a symbolic sense, we've killed Osama bin Laden, we've killed Ayman al-Zawahiri, the 2 preeminent leaders of al-Qaeda. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the architect of the 9/11 attacks, is in Guantanamo Bay. So yes, we definitely have, in that sense, I think we have served justice, but it's an incomplete service of justice because, of course, there's roughly around 40 detainees of the original 800 or so still left in Guantanamo that really their cases have to be resolved in one way or another. We can't, prolong their detention, never bring them to trial, never give them the opportunity to have charges brought against them and to defend themselves in court. So in that sense, one way or the other, the war on terror continues, much as we would like to completely close the book on it.
I want to ask you about Afghanistan, but since you brought up Guantanamo Bay, I was thinking the same thing. It seems like it's this loose end of the war on terror with this kind of court system we sort of invented out of a corner of like military justice rather than the actual court system that now we don't know how to unfold and resolve. Like, is there a path out of Guantanamo Bay for the U.S. government, or are we just sort of stuck with these 40 people basically for the rest of their lives?
Well, one hopes that we're not, because then we're becoming like the old Soviet Union, which we rightly criticized for throwing people into Siberian prisons in the Gulag, never giving them a chance to defend themselves, and subjecting them to indefinite, forever detention. But the trouble is, of course, because in the beginning of the war on terror, we did certain things that would completely vitiate their appearance in a duly constituted court of law in the United States. As the CIA calls it, enhanced interrogation, torture, whatever it's called. I mean, those kinds of things make it enormously difficult now to actually bring them to trial. Now, last March and April, there was a very successful trial just outside of Washington, D.C., of one of the so-called ISIS Beatles. That is one of the British members of ISIS who were particularly brutal and savage to the American and British and other Westerners held hostage. And that was very impressive. He was convicted in a court of law. He was given a chance to defend himself. But again, it was a very different situation. He was only apprehended in 2018, and he was not sent to Guantanamo. So this goes to exactly to your previous question, is that we'd love to close the book, but we really can't. And I think as long as the 40 or so detainees situation at Guantanamo remains unresolved one way or another, the war on terror continues despite our wishes that it would end.
Briefly, I want to ask you about Afghanistan. Here's what President Biden said last year about America's interest in Afghanistan as it relates to al-Qaeda. Watch.
What interest do we have in Afghanistan at this point with al-Qaeda gone? We went to Afghanistan for the express purpose of getting rid of al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, as well as getting Osama bin Laden. And we did. We went and did the mission. You've known my position for a long, long time. It's time to end this war.
Briefly, before I got to let you go, how does this affect the calculus on America's reasons for going to Afghanistan and the way in which America pulled out?
Well, given that Ayman al-Zawahiri was living in a luxury villa in a very tony part of Kabul, under the complete knowledge of the Taliban, and was indeed treated like a VIP. I mean, obviously, we did not succeed in our mission to eliminate the al-Qaeda threat based in Afghanistan. And although it's enormously positive, it's tremendously significant that we killed al-Zawahiri and have knocked al-Qaeda off balance again. There'll be someone to succeed him, and this struggle will continue.
Georgetown professor Bruce Hoffman, a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. Appreciate you talking this through. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
A lawyer for WNBA star Brittany Greiner says her trial in Russia could be over very soon. She was back in a Moscow courtroom today. Her defense team brought in an expert to analyze the cannabis cartridges at the center of her case. Mrs. Greiner is pleading guilty. Her legal team is pushing for a lighter sentence than the 10 years it is expecting. Brittany Greiner will be back in court on Thursday for both sides' closing arguments. Sticking with sports, it seems Tiger Woods turned down hundreds of millions of dollars from a controversial new golf tour funded by the Saudis. LIV Golf wanted Mr. Woods to play in its Golf Invitational Series. Its CEO, golf legend Greg Norman, addressed the rejection in an interview last night.
So you keep reading that you offered Tiger Woods $700, $800, $1 billion, some unknown number to join LIV. Is that true?
That number was out there before I became CEO. So that number's been out there, yes.
Yeah.
And look, Tiger's a needle mover, right?
Yeah.
So, of course, you're going to look at the best of the best.
Tiger Woods remains a member of the PGA. It has already suspended players who joined LIV Golf. We have yet to hear back from his representatives for direct comment. Now, if you're a golf fan, we would love to hear from you about LIV Golf and Tiger Woods' decision. You can leave us a brief but brilliant voicemail, 888-575-2NBC. That's 888-575-2622, or email us nowtonight@NBCnews.com. Might also hear from some Miami Dolphins fans because the NFL is punishing that team for a range of offenses. Among them, trying to poach Tom Brady twice. Team owner Stephen Ross is being fined $1.5 million and suspended until October. The league also stripped the Finns of 2 draft picks, one next year, one the year after. An investigation found that the team tried to recruit Tom Brady away while he was under contract with the New England Patriots. Then it tried again after he had joined the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the Finns pulled a similar move with Sean Payton while he was still coach of the New Orleans Saints. According to investigators, the Dolphins did this a number of times, and that violates the league's anti-tampering policy. Now, you may remember former Dolphins coach Brian Flores. He sued the league and a number of teams for racial discrimination. His accusations included these tampering claims, and that prompted the league's inquiry, led by a former U.S. attorney. Mr. Flores also claimed that team owner Stephen Ross offered him $100,000 for every game that the Dolphins lost. That's because the NFL draft prioritizes teams with the worst records. But the league, in its investigation, said that this was, quote, not intended or taken to be a serious offer. California, New York, and Illinois made emergency declarations in their fights against monkeypox. But getting a vaccine remains extremely hard. What you need to know about the virus and how to stay safe when we come back. New York State, California, and Illinois have America's 3 largest cities, New York, LA, Chicago. They also have almost half of America's confirmed monkeypox cases. And all 3 states have made emergency declarations to help stop the spread. Officials say these proclamations let states speed up vaccinations, work on contact tracing, and prevent more infections. So far, we know of nearly 6,000 cases of monkeypox in 48 states indicated on the map. Also, Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico. The highest number of states are in red, and then you see in purple. Montana and Wyoming are the only 2 states that have not reported cases yet. The CDC says there are more than 25,000 cases around the world that we know of, mostly in the U.S., Spain, and the U.K. Joining us now is Dr. Anand Swaminathan. He's an assistant professor of emergency medicine at Staten Island University Hospital. Dr. Swaminathan, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with a couple of true-false statements just to clear through some of the top-line confusion about monkeypox. First of all, true or false? Monkeypox can only be transmitted through sexual activity. True or false?
That is absolutely false. And this is one of the pieces of misinformation, false narratives that we've been hearing again and again. This is not a sexually transmitted infection, although it does require close contact. And obviously, sex is going to be one of those places where there is that close contact. And that's why we do see transmission happening there. But it is not a sexually transmitted infection. And that kind of line of thinking and talking points that we've heard really stigmatizes this disease and stigmatizes those who have it, makes it much harder for us to reach those groups and get them the care that they need.
Okay, true or false? You can get monkeypox just by being in the same room as someone who has monkeypox. True or false?
This is also false. And this is something that we do hear, again, quite a bit, or people are afraid of even being in the same room, sharing the same space. It's highly unlikely because you do need that close contact, even among household contacts. So non-sexual household contacts of somebody who has monkeypox, the rate of transmission is extremely low. We're talking about less than 6, 7, 8%. So it's very unlikely that just by sharing the same space with someone, you're going to contract this. Although I will point out we are still in the middle of a COVID pandemic. So putting on a mask when you're indoors with people you don't know, still a good idea.
One more. Monkeypox symptoms can last up to a month. True or false?
This is the one that's true. This is what we have been seeing, what we've seen reported. People can have symptoms for quite a long time. And it's really important to stay isolated while you're symptomatic so you're not spreading it to others. And one of the really important points that we have to be pushing for on a federal level is for income protection so that people who have monkeypox, who are still symptomatic, who still can spread, can keep themselves isolated for as long as they need to protect others around them.
This is a bit different than our fight against COVID, where we had to invent a vaccine and then get it deployed around the world. There is already a vaccine that is somewhat effective against monkeypox. It's been targeted largely to men who have sex with men, transgender or non-binary men, particularly people who have had multiple sexual partners in the last 14 days. And I wonder what your sense is of how this deployment is going. I've heard a number of stories from people who say they're having a hard time getting others to really care about monkeypox because since we've kind of started by targeting men who have sex with men, gay men, bisexual men, straight people figure, oh, well, this doesn't affect me because I'm not gay. And if they don't want to get it, they should just reduce their number of sexual partners, which is super offensive to your gay friends and also defies the medical reality of how monkeypox spreads.
And again, it's another line of thinking that further stigmatizes this disease and makes it much harder for us to fight and contain it. So we really do, as a population, need to be thinking not just about who's getting the disease right now, which is important for us to focus on, but also what could happen down the line. The longer we let this spread, the more groups are going to be affected by it, and that can cause more problems down the line. So we really should be paying attention to this and being on top of it. And vaccines are part of the answer. They're not all the answer. They're not going to be able to solve this problem for us. There are other things we need to do, but vaccines can be extremely helpful. Unfortunately, we are a little limited in how much vaccine we have, but more importantly, because we don't have an organized federal response, a really well put together federal response, we're not getting those vaccines to everywhere where they need to be. We're hearing in San Francisco that some clinics have up to 10,000 people that are eligible that are waiting for a vaccine. That's unconscionable. If we have vaccine, we need to do a better job of getting it to those who need it, who can really benefit from it. And that's how we can help to contain. Again, there's a lot of other things to do, but this is a big piece in helping to contain the problem.
I know that the Biden administration has appointed a monkeypox czar who's going to start working on improving this response. In the meantime, before I have to let you go, I'd love your advice for people who may be at risk. That includes gay and bisexual men. There are a number of big public events going on this summer. Up your alley in San Francisco, formerly known as the Dory Alley Festival, just happened. Market Days is coming up in Chicago, then Folsom Street Fair back in San Francisco. There are lots of events where large groups of potentially at-risk men who have sex with men will be in very close physical proximity. What should we be doing to keep ourselves safe until we can get vaccinated? Briefly, before we go.
This is a really important question. We have to do whatever we can to avoid that close contact with those who have a symptomatic monkeypox. So if you're interacting with someone who has a fever, who has symptoms, who has a rash, that might be someone you really do want to give a little bit more distance to. And we understand how difficult that can be, how important it is to have these social connections. But right now, we really do need to try to avoid those contacts to avoid further spread. But really where we need to focus is not on what the individual should be doing, but what the federal government should be doing, which is declaring this an emergency to rally the proper resources, not just to men having sex with men, but to that group to start so that we can really contain this, make it less of a problem, get more vaccine to those who need it so we can protect them. That's what we need to do and focus on the federal level as opposed to just what the individual can do.
Dr. Anand Swaminathan of Staten Island University Hospital, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
No one tells Lizzo or Beyonce what not to say, but their fans asked, and they agreed. Both pop stars are removing a word from their latest albums, considered offensive by some folks with disabilities. We'll explain before we go. Beyonce says she will remove a word from her new album, Renaissance. The word is spaz. Now, if you never really consider that word especially offensive or problematic, then this story is for you, because it is considered a slur against some people with disabilities, particularly those with conditions like cerebral palsy. Beyonce's team said the word was not used intentionally and it'll be replaced. This summer, you may remember Lizzo came under fire for using the same word on her new album. She has since updated the lyric in the song Girls. Lizzo said, quote, "I never want to promote derogatory language," unquote. Some of you told us that you can relate to this. Dan in Pennsylvania writes, "I'm a 30-something man who has been disabled for a decent portion of my life, though not currently, due to Tourette syndrome tics that are part of a juking, joint-cracking, spasmodic nature. If someone were to use the word spaz derogatorily in art or in person to me, I would find it highly offensive and painful. People cannot imagine how hurtful their ignorance or hate can be, and I appreciate Beyonce and Lizzo for removing this offensive word from their works. I hope others will take the time to think before using it as well. Dan, thank you very much for sharing your story with us. Let's discuss this further with Isabel Mavrides Calderon, a disability rights activist. Welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the impact of this word? And I just want to say, first of all, I understand that the word is considered offensive by some, but because I think so few people kind of get the scope of its offensiveness, I may need to use it a few times in this conversation. I apologize in advance. But when you hear that word, or when people for whom this is hurtful hear that word, what is the impact of it?
I think many people think it's just a word, but when disability, an identity of someone, and a medical term is used as a synonym for an insult or for something being bad, and people start thinking that disability is an insult, that disability is a bad thing. Disabled folk have so many negative stereotypes, particularly people who have cerebral palsy have so many negative stereotypes associated with them, that when someone with such a huge platform uses a word like this, people in the mainstream start thinking that disabled people do have those stereotypes are true, which isn't the case.
You see the term ableism on the screen. Tell me a little bit more about this idea of ableism. I think it's just kind of beginning to permeate the culture in terms of the way that people who don't have diagnosed physical disabilities might make assumptions or presumptions about the world that don't really factor everyone in.
Yes. So ableism is the discrimination against disabled folk. And many times people think that that just means outwardly hating disabled people. But in reality, it's so much more than that. It can be looking down on disabled people. It can be thinking that disabled folk need a cure to be happy or successful. It can mean associating disability with a bad thing, like when we use ableist language.
Is there a difference, and I'm just trying to feel out the contours of this word in terms of how you see it. Is there a difference between, say, looking at someone who has like a kind of a spasmodic disorder, who has certain kinds of cerebral palsy, and mocking them in that moment if they happen to spasm, as opposed to using it in context where they're just using it to describe silly behavior or being befuddled or perplexed and not knowing what to do? I mean, are there gradations? Are there shades of gray in the way that we view terms like this? Or do you believe it's always bad all the time, no one should ever use it ever?
I think there's a big difference between intent and impact, but intent can still have a great harm, even if we don't know that it's harmful. So I think that in all contexts, it's extremely harmful. I think we can see someone mocking a disabled person and know that it's bad, but when we see someone like Lizzo or Beyonce that we respect using this word, it can be harmful as well because we respect them and we think that it's okay. So seeing people in the mainstream using words like this really normalizes it. So I do think that it is still extremely harmful, but I do think that we have to take their intent to account. Neither of them claims to have known it was a bad thing, and both of them did make the change. So I think it's important to know that, to have grace, and to respect them for listening to the disabled community.
We should also note that the way that the words are used in the song is not like material to the point of the song. It was a fairly easy edit, so honestly, I think it would have been weird if they had been like, absolutely not, this is the lyric that I picked. It's not like it was what the song was about, so it seemed kind of easy to edit. I know I got to let you go in a second, but I know a lot of well-meaning people who will hear a conversation like this and think, God, are there no landmines? I'm trying so hard to be aware of everyone's needs and concerns and soft spots and touchy points, and I feel like by saying anything, I risk offending somebody, getting canceled, getting denounced. I don't even know what's safe to say anymore. For people who feel like this whole conversation about ableism is just new and frankly a little scary, what would you say to them?
Well, I would start by saying that the conversation surrounding ableism isn't new. It's just new to the mainstream media. Disabled folk have been having these conversations for decades, but now people are finally starting to listen. So I think some things to keep in mind is that, yes, ableist language has become normalized in our society. a good thing to know is if you're using a medical term or a disability as a synonym for an insult, then that's when you know that you're starting to say something wrong. When you're using a medical term or disability, but as anything other than being a medical term or a disability, then you should like put your little alarm bells on, knowing that you're saying something wrong. And first and foremost, listen to the disabled community, listen to disabled creators, listen to disability rights activists, and learn from them.
Isabel Mavrides Calderon, I appreciate you talking this through with us tonight and hopefully making some people aware of something that we may not be aware of. Thank you very much. This was very helpful.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, we always welcome your thoughts and questions on this or anything we discuss. We are at NBC Now Tonight on social media. You can leave us a voicemail, 888-575-2NBC, or email us nowtonight@NBCnews.com. Remember, we would love to hear from you about Tiger Woods and LIV Golf, but we'd love to hear from you about just about anything, including tonight's primaries. Chuck Todd and Kristen Welker are standing by in Washington for our Meet the Press election special. I'll join them a little later with analysis of the big races. But until we meet again, I'm Joshua Johnson. Thank you for making time for us. And sit tight. Our live special coverage is next on NBC News Now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.